Hello and good day, everybody. My name is Anne Keane, and on behalf of Preservica, we welcome you all to this webinar. It's really great to see how many of you are attending this afternoon. During this session, we'll hear from 3 Preservica customers. We will hear how they are tackling digital preservation in their organizations and the work that they are performing and planning to ensure the long-term protection and accessibility to their vital records and collections in their organizations. There are a lot of archives and libraries across the world that very much faces the similar issues when it comes to digital preservation. And so working in a collaborative way, liaising with others and sharing experiences is really key in this domain. Here, for example, are pictures from our annual user groups. This year, for obvious reasons, we all had to meet up online rather than in person, and we had over 350 participants attending in the 2 days in April, all learning from each other. Before we move on to introduce today's speakers, I just want to let you know that we'll be running a Q&A session after the talks today. So if you have any questions, please type them into the question tab on the GoToWebinar toolbar that you'll find, and we'll get through as many of these as we can later. So I'm delighted to be joined today in this session by our 3 guest speakers. First, we'll hear from Kimberly Dye. Kimberly is a Digitisation and Digital Preservation Coordinator at the State Library of South Australia. Kimberly will be sharing some of the digital preservation plans and initiatives that are currently taking place at the library. After Kimberly, we'll hear from William Hood. William is the manager of the library and information services at Moore College. William will sharing his perspective on the importance of digital preservation and their plans for the future. And finally, we welcome Jay Weatherburn. Jay have at least 2 roles. She's the program manager for the digital preservation at the University of Melbourne, and she's also head of the Australasia and APAC for DPC, the Digital Preservation Coalition. So Jay will be sharing information and ways that you can join in and collaborate with the growing digital preservation community in your area. So thank you to all 3 of you today for taking time out of your really busy schedule to share your stories with us today. So without further delay, let's get things started with our first speaker, Kimberly Dye. Welcome, Kimberly, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Just make sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Kimberly, and I'm pleased to let you have a glimpse into the complexities of digital preservation planning and initiatives currently underway at the State Library of South Australia. Over the past decade or so, we've been investing in increasing our theoretical knowledge of digital preservation, but we are currently experiencing a very sharp learning curve in putting all of that theory into practice with implementing our first system. To provide a little bit of context about our digital collections, in total we have approximately 150 terabytes of data with an annual growth rate of around 25 terabytes. This averages out to be around 35,000 images plus a few thousand audio and film editions annually. So roughly 3% of our total physical collection is digitized, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that 3% equates to around over 138 million collection items. Our mandate is to collect items of significance relating to South Australia, which means we collect any and all potential formats, including photographs, oral history, floppy disks, pre-pressed newspapers, and we even have a couple of donated computers. We obviously collect born digital, but we also have specialist studios and staff for digitising audio, film, print and imaging. But I do think it's always good to mention that digitisation is not digital preservation. Digitisation helps provide for access and is a preservation strategy for hard copy materials, keeping those originals safer for longer, but it is not a digital preservation strategy on its own. Digital preservation is the combination of policies, strategies, and managed actions that ensure access to digital material for as long as necessary. And in our case, that can mean in perpetuity. Currently, our digital collections are held as a file storage system that has fixity checks run on a regular basis. Because we had no pre-existing software requirements in how we were managing our digital collections, it provided us with a lot of flexibility when looking at preservation systems and gave us the opportunity to start fresh with something new that we didn't have any dependencies to consider. However, now we are needing to dissect what our digital objects are for ongoing preservation actions and considering policies and procedures to record this information as we approach ingest for our collections on a format by format basis. You can see here a little breakdown of our digital collections as a percentage, and I should probably add the disclaimer that our newspapers delivered through Trove and websites available through Pandora are not included in these figures. In June 2020, the State Library of South Australia announced that Preservica had been awarded the contract to provide our first digital preservation system. Our implementation plan incorporates both learning about the functionality of Preservica in a test site and implementing our production site. We are anticipating this project will run for approximately 2 years. You can see here a bit of a brainstorm I created while in isolation at the start of our journey and how we were mapping all the work packages that we are pivoting to and from iteratively. I think it's important to also highlight our 9 key objectives from our implementation plan. We want to initiate digital preservation processes at State Library of South Australia through the successful implementation of the Preservica system as a first step to becoming a trusted digital repository. Develop understanding and competencies in a core group of staff from key business areas, establish preservation and technical metadata standards, and undertake the required data remediation additions in our library management system. Create a metadata exchange and synchronization between our library management system, Sierra, Preservica, and any of our other metadata sources. Complete ingest and migration workflows for each of the key file formats represented in our digital collections. Establish consistency between our digital collecting, processing, and preservation procedures for archival and published collections. Document processes, business rules and procedures to inform future decisions and create a new version of our digital preservation policies that incorporates all of these things. Trial Preservica's Universal Access Portal for improved delivery to the public for file formats that are not currently served by our existing discovery systems. And for us, that includes film, video, audio, and computer files. And lastly, we want to explore the use of APIs to deliver content from Preservica in our existing discovery systems. Content on media is vulnerable to format, software, and hardware obsolescence. There is a need to process this material quickly to retain its integrity and authenticity. Unlike a paper-based object that could be left alone for a long time and will probably still be in a usable, readable state, digital objects need continuous monitoring and protection to guarantee their usability in the future. But there is a risk of not being able to identify changes to files and the possible loss of digital content. Authenticity is of paramount importance. We need to ensure that digital objects are what they say they are, right down to the smallest little bit. In some cases, simply opening a file in the wrong environment can create irreversible change. It's also critical to document changes and resulting actions to ensure security of systems for digital assets and to have policies and procedures that ensure information is preserved against all reasonable contingencies. The aim is to have authenticated copies of the original or is traceable to the original to enable the information to be disseminated and for memory institutions like libraries to retain their reputation as trusted places in the eyes of the community. Thankfully, once all of our digital collections are in our digital preservation system, it will record each and every event that happens to a digital object. This ensures the provenance and integrity of objects over time. If one bit or byte is lost or corrupted, a researcher may feel like that provenance is lost and may be worth less because of it. As Cal Lee states, a major rule of digital curation is to minimize irreversible transformations. And one of the methods for achieving this is through creating disk images. By creating a bit-for-bit copy of a disk, you can make sure all the bits are safe and remove the need to depend on obsolete or damaged carriers to access digital content, which segues us nicely into a little project currently underway at the State Library. We hold a collection of approximately 800 3.5-inch floppy disks donated by world-renowned artist Stanis Stoyakovsky. His archive has been accepted into the Australian Register of the UNESCO Memory of the World. He was a pioneer in the digital arts, and the disks range in dates from 1988 to 1994 and were created on an Archimedes PC using a RISC operating system. This is a fairly difficult collection to deal with. We have obsolete hardware, obsolete software, combined with complex objects and high significance. Fortunately, not only do I get to work with some very clever people who can delve into the minutiae of technical detail required to replicate, migrate, and emulate these astonishing artworks, but as parts of our collection holdings, we also have slides of photographs taken by the artist rendering his artworks on his Archimedes PC. So we have a primary source to look to when we're making decisions through migration and replication actions. We've also tested ingesting this material into our test site of Preservica to ensure that these objects can be permanently preserved, be retrieved, and are continuously accessible. There are many hidden wonders on unopened disks and other digital media in the State Library's collections. Implementing our digital preservation system will be a key catalyst for changing the way staff think about handling digital items, and I believe it will be responsible for promoting widespread cultural change within the organisation. This change of mindset will help to liberate digital objects from the dark recesses of our storage collections and into the hands of researchers and the wider community who will appreciate and understand them for their enduring cultural value. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was absolutely great. They were quite interesting to learn that almost 50% of your collection consists of AV material. That is a big proportion, really. Right. Okay. So let me introduce also my next speaker is William Hood from Moore College. Welcome, William. Over to you.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's a real privilege to be able to present now. My name, as you know, is William Hood, and I'm the Manager of Library and Information Services at Moore Theological College in Sydney. We're a much smaller institution than the State Library of South Australia, but we still have a significant amount of digital preservation that we need to do. We're an Anglican college, training men and women to work in churches and other organisations in Sydney, across Australia and around the world. And we have courses ranging from non-accredited online diploma up to a fully accredited PhD program. And we're located in Newtown, an inner suburb of Sydney, adjacent to the campus of Sydney University. The library of our college is the Donald Robinson Library, and this is the largest theological library in the Southern Hemisphere, which has a very large print collection, has a significant rare book collection and physical archives. But for over 10 years, we have increasingly focused on digital items, which leads us to the topic of today's seminar, looking at digital preservation. And I will obviously be speaking from the perspective of the college, but I hope most of the principles would apply to any other institution as well. Now, there are primarily 4 reasons why we have been building our digital archive over these last 10 years. The first one is one that's already been raised, and that is of obsolete media formats. We have a lot of content, a lot of media content in formats that are pretty much obsolete these days, including about 7,500 audio files, over 1,000 video files, and various other formats as well. And not many of our users have access to a cassette tape recorder or a VHS video player, let alone a Betamax player or a reel-to-reel tape recorder or even the ability to play floppy disks. The second reason is that we really need to ensure long-term preservation, as most of our material will be of value for many years into the future for students and researchers. So without active steps to preserve the digital data, it is very easily lost. For many of the creators of our content, it's very easy to be focused on the present and not to consider the long-term value of some of the items that they're working with. So for example, our marketing department takes a lot of photographs for their marketing purposes, but they are taking them for the present and not thinking of the value of these items into the future as a historical record. And likewise, our lecturers and their lecturing material. The third important reason is to provide digital surrogates for some of our rare items. As I mentioned, we have a rare book collection and some archives, and some of those items are very fragile. So by digitizing them, we can provide access to those without damaging the original items. And finally, we have many users outside the college, including alumni and the general community. And the digital archive allows much easier access. As well as theological material, which is our primary focus, we also have items of general interest. One of which I'll mention is the photographic collection of the Reverend Frank Cash, who was the rector of the church at Lavender Bay, and he was a keen amateur photographer, and he also had a very good view of the Harbour Bridge construction, which was happening about 90 or 100 years ago. And his photographs document the construction of the bridge and are some of the best photographs of that particular period, and they are actually in our collection. So what can systems like Preservica do for us? Well, I see digital preservation as sort of like a puzzle with lots of pieces that need to be put into place for an effective system. And we adopted Preservica earlier this year because it put a lot of the pieces into place. It does a lot more than this, but some of the things that interested us and some of the reasons why we chose this system was its ability to handle file format migration over time as digital file formats become obsolete. It does provide long-term digital preservation. It has very good ways of preventing accidental deletion of files, and it was a central location of our archive, so we're not relying on corporate memory for the location of all of our different digital assets across multiple systems. But there's still lots of pieces that we have to put into place to complete the puzzle. So the initial digitization of all of these obsolete formats is something that we've been working on for at least 10 years and is an ongoing project. Also locating all of the items to be preserved. They may be on various systems around the college, and finding them can be rather tricky at times. And of course, metadata creation and organization of the material once we have located it. So what's happened this year? Well, of course, this year, as you all know, has been an extraordinary year. And digital has become much more important during the COVID crisis. Just as an aside, we've spent most of our monograph budget this year on ebooks to allow students to have remote access to materials that in previous years they would have accessed via the print collection. And this has also led to an increasing importance of digitizing some of our resources, such as our pamphlet collection. And because this is such a unique period in history, at least we hope it's a unique period in history, we've begun capturing a snapshot of the COVID era particularly how churches have responded without the ability for physical meetings, capturing a sample of churches' websites to document this period in time for future research purposes. Now, our plans for the future, we've only adopted Preservica at the beginning of this year. So the first thing we're doing is migrating our legacy system across to Preservica and ingesting all of that material. Secondly, we'll be looking for extra digital items across the college that are in need of preservation and ingesting them into Preservica. We will continue the digitisation of our print and media resources in the library, particularly those that are valuable or those that are fragile or those that have particular demands on them. And we'll be setting up a schedule to capture either as a snapshot or a regular scan of significant websites in our diocese. So we have actively been working on digital preservation for 10 years, although, as I said, quite new to Preservica. We have a long way to go, but I think we've made significant progress over these years in building an archive of over 14,000 items with a small but dedicated staff. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, William. That was really interesting. Love the pictures you had and the very, very colourful green carpet in your library, by the way. So our next and final speaker is Jay Weatherburn. Welcome, Jay, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jay Weatherburn, and yes, I work for both the University of Melbourne in Australia and the International Digital Preservation Coalition. I would like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I am currently living and working, the land of the Wurundjeri, and pay respect to the elders past and present, and also extend that respect to traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. So my purpose here today is to really highlight the importance of community in all of our digital stewardship endeavours and to share a couple of community building activities that I'm involved in the Australasian region. There is also an invitation I come with here to everyone listening today to get involved with these activities. Firstly, I would like to talk a little about the Australasia Preserves Digital Preservation Community of Practice for Australia, New Zealand, and the broader Australasian region. Australasia Preserves is a community set up with support from the University of Melbourne in the first instance to give us all a way to share our good practice, to share our knowledge, and to share our expertise with each other. We know that managing digital materials for the long term requires so many different skills, and no one person is going to have all of these skills or be able to do it alone. The Australasia Preserves community was founded back in February 2018 from this real need to have some kind of broad support network to enable us to support each other and to share and to collaborate with others doing digital preservation work in our region. Australasia Preserves has an online forum which anyone is welcome to join and contribute to. The community also has a group of volunteer organisers who meet monthly, and we develop topics and we organise speakers for our monthly online meetups. These meetups allow us to connect with each other and learn from each other, and they're especially needed given our geographic distance from each other in some cases. These online meetups, they've been really, really invaluable during this global pandemic time we find ourselves in. I think while, you know, we've been really disconnected physically, we have this way to remain connected virtually. Here, I have done too many, I'm doing well with my slide change-ups. We're on the right one. Here is a recent example of a monthly meetup that we ran. The topic, it was very topical. It was focused on COVID-19 collection strategies. and work being done by some folks in our region. The link here on the slide is here for you to read and to watch more on this if you're interested, if you haven't seen this yet. During this meetup, our speakers that we had shared their work, covering a lot of common challenge areas with collecting digital materials, and noting that these challenges are made even more pressing during this pandemic era because of the volume of materials in some cases, and the speed with which we need to capture and collect this COVID-19 evidence for the future. In many cases, with digital materials, especially online, a rapid response is required. Some of the common challenges that we discussed included collecting and preserving social media and emails, how to best redact personal information in emails, and with donations of government materials such as border passes that have personally identifiable information on them. Collecting COVID-19 podcasts in a quick and responsive way also came up, with challenges noted around the rights and access questions that come with these. Here is another quick example of our most recent meetup on emulation work happening in our region. It was really great to be able to welcome Ewan Cochrane to share information about the Emulation as a Service Infrastructure Program of Work. We had Melanie Swalwell, Professor of Digital Media Heritage at Swinburne University, discussing the Play It Again and Archiving Australian Media Arts projects. Melanie is also leading a funding proposal to set up an Australian-based Emulation as a Service network and is inviting people to get in touch if interested. There is information on the Australasia Preserves Forum about that. We also had Tim Mifsud from the National Archives of Australia. He bravely shared some live demos of his work with emulation. The National Archives of Australia is exploring emulation as a preservation strategy, especially as they have legal obligations to provide access to digital files that can no longer be accessed in current computer environments. And we were also really fortunate to have Gareth Kay join us from the National Library of Australia, sharing details of their advanced experience with emulation projects and their software library, noting the many complex legal aspects that arise with emulation work. I do have to say that the question and the discussion time that we have at these meetups is often really interesting and really useful. So if you haven't been to one, you know, of course I'm biased, but I really do highly recommend getting involved in future meetups. I want to talk a little now about a really quite exciting partnership between the Digital Preservation Coalition and the University of Melbourne. The DPC, for anyone not familiar, is a not-for-profit international membership organisation with the vision of a secure digital legacy for everyone. In January this year, the DPC and the Uni of Melbourne have established a collaboration to enable the opening of the first DPC office in the Southern Hemisphere to add to the existing DPC executive team office in Glasgow and additional staff team that is based in York. My role with the DPC as part of this partnership is dedicated to enabling improved access to the DPC's program of activities for members across the Southern Hemisphere, and also to work towards establishing a permanent and self-sustaining presence for the DPC in the Australasian region. As part of this role, I now have recognised and dedicated time to continue to support the Australasia Preserves community of practice as well, which is wonderful. Part of the really important work for this region, I think, also is to find ways to amplify Australasian messages and successes and strengths in digital preservation back to the international community. We have such a lot of expertise and experience here that can offer a lot to the worldwide community, and there's not always easy ways to do this. I think DPC membership offers one pathway to connect digital preservation practitioners here with colleagues overseas. So as I talk to you today, there are 10 Australasian-based members of the DPC currently, out of the grand total of 108 DPC members spread all around the world. There is a very broad and intersectoral mix of DPC Australasian member organisations, as you can see, which it brings different approaches and expertise to the table, as we all deal with very similar digital preservation challenges, even though our contexts might be quite different. Research and higher education interests are represented through the University of Melbourne, the University of Sydney Library, the University of Adelaide and Monash University. There is a strong archives focus from the National Archives of Australia and the Australian Society of Archivists. Records management interests and concerns are represented by RIMPA, the Records and Information Professionals Australasia. IATSIS brings a much needed Indigenous knowledges perspective to the table. Research infrastructure provider AARNet is a member, and the National and State Libraries of Australia are also DPC members. Together, the DPC Australasian members have set up a stakeholder group to help develop a local work plan and guide member priorities in our region for development to meet this grand goal of building a global community that is scaled to the digital preservation challenge. We are really keen to extend an invitation to get involved with the work of the DPC and help us to build this growing initiative. So here is how to get involved. I've popped some links into this slide to find out more about the DPC and the Australasia Preserves Community of Practice. I truly believe that there is so much value in investing time and energy for community development to progress shared digital preservation goals. I think that through community we learn, we share, we collaborate, and we can support each other to do this really important legacy building work for future generations. So thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you in these thriving community spaces sometime soon.
Right, thank you, Jay. That was really informative. And as we all know, and as you're also telling everybody, collaboration is really much key in this domain. So yeah, I hope everybody takes part. Right, we're going to put our videos on, and there we are. So we're now moving into the Q&A part of today's sessions. I can see that lots of questions are coming in, and to help me in this part, I've been joined by my colleague Tracy Broadhurst, who's been collecting these questions along the way and can help sort of share them out. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Anne. Thank you, and thanks everybody. Jay, I didn't realise that Ewan Cochrane from Yale. Obviously, he's a fellow Aussie, isn't he? So,
New Zealander, yeah, no. Stuck in New Zealand because of COVID.
He's from New Zealand, Tracy.
He's from New Zealand. Sorry. Oh gosh, my apologies. But quite well known, isn't he, on the speaking circuit? That's good. That's good. Okay, we've got a few questions popping up, and actually back to you, Jay. Just quickly. Cassie Hayes said she'd heard that SLV just joined the DPC. I'm not sure if you were aware. She just popped that up in the message box.
Yeah, State Library Victoria is part of the NASLA, the National and State Libraries of Australia membership of DPC.
Yeah, that's good. Another one. Okay, now my first question is from Sally, and this is to William, if you wouldn't mind, William. What do you see as the main differences between digital preservation and preservation of physical assets?
Thank you for that question. I mean, some things are similar, but I think with physical assets, a lot has to do with the environment, with storage, temperature control, humidity control, acid reduction control. So it's very much an environmental solution to physical items. Digital items, I think, have a whole different range of issues. Some of them have been touched upon in the talks this afternoon. Finding the digital items, I think a physical item is actually sitting in front of you. It's sort of, you can see it. Digital items are very easy to hide in cloud services, in all sorts of repositories. So I think finding the digital items is one thing. The whole issue of format, file format, physical format that changes over time, software obsolescence. So managing all of those processes, I think, is I think it's a lot more complicated than physical asset preservation, dealing with all of those issues.
No, true. And our fellow speakers, please chime in if you've got anything to add on any of the answers that we get today. Thanks, William. And just check. Okay, the next question is for Jay. How do you keep the momentum and connections going for a community of practice that is led and run by members of the community volunteering?
Yes, the community building sustainability question. It is such a challenge. We all have day jobs as well as having this passion for sustaining a broad support network. Speaking from a personal perspective, I think it really helps to be interested in and passionate about what you do to keep you going, especially when you're trying to build a community around it. But more importantly, I think it helps to find those energized and dedicated individuals in your community and bring them together to share the load and to help keep that momentum going. For example, this year the Australasia Preserves has a group of volunteer organizers. We take it in turns to organize our monthly catch-ups. We share community building work among us. We set up and keep the website going. We find topics and speakers for monthly meetups. We write blog posts. We make recordings and share them. It's a group effort. No one person can keep a community going. I think I would also just say it requires investment from everybody, not just the organizers group, but every single individual who signs up to join the Australasia Preserves community of practice. We encourage people to introduce themselves when they join, to ask questions, no matter how silly they might feel their question is. We have a code of conduct and we work really hard to provide this space where everyone feels welcome, no matter their background or their level of experience. And I think in providing that space, you go a long way towards encouraging a community to build its own momentum and to make its own serendipitous connections. At least I hope that's the case.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And you know, like you said, asking questions, no matter how silly one person thinks they are. I've got a couple of working groups going here with various customers around the globe, and just listening to them on the working groups and sharing their screen as well, showing things to other people. We've got more benefit out of that, I think, and also sharing little documents around people in the group, like little tips on the coding and stuff like that. You know, it saves other people struggling to do things when you can just share it amongst yourself. There's been a huge amount of progress really from that side of things. So thanks, Jay, I agree with you. Let's check here. I'm sort of reading some of these questions as they come up. How is ingestion carried out in absence of discovery system from the web-based infrastructure that has unstructured records and contents created and stored? Anybody like to take that question? It's not directed at anybody in particular. Any of our three panelists? Shall I read it again? How is ingestion carried out in absence of a discovery system from the web-based infrastructure that has unstructured records and contents created and stored? I know personally how Preservica does it, but I'm going to open that out to Kimberly. You're nodding your head.
Well, I'm nodding, and that's a huge problem. We're still in our testing phases, and obviously we're still yet to make decisions about how access and discoverability layers are going to be put with our digital preservation system. So we're still in the process of making a lot of decisions, and we've been testing various different methods of ingest at the same time. So I guess my answer is don't know yet with how we're going to be approaching that. but yeah, it's definitely something that we are in the midst of all considering at the moment.
Anyone else, William or Jay, want to offer any insights?
I think I'll probably echo that. It's pretty early stages for us too, so we're still very much in the exploring, learning ourselves phase on that side of things.
No, appreciate that.
And we have quite a bit of data remediation work to do. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the case for lots of people. Okay, thank you for that, Feroz. And now we've got one. This is for Kimberly. What are your access strategies using an access portal or investing in something else? That's from John. Thanks, John.
Yeah, that's one of the big questions that we have for ourselves at the moment. So we're definitely sort of playing with the Preservica portal and seeing what it can and can't do, and how that looks. We have a really excellent media viewer that we have that for images for our collection. So we're going to also look at exploring using the API to work alongside that. But yeah, the answer is don't know yet. But we need to sort of invest time in writing an access policy, test a bunch of different ways of doing things, and work out what's going to be best for our community of users, and then hopefully that'll be all part of the implementation plan as we finalise that over the next couple of years.
And I suppose you've got some information that's needs to be publicly available, some only internal, and so on, and those challenges you need to work through as well.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, copyright issues on archival material and published material, and all those donor agreements we need to consider as well. So access is a complicated issue.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thank you. William, we've got one here asking about the images of the Harbour Bridge, those fantastic images that you've got, whether they're available to the public. Yes,
they'll be on our Preservica user site. Oh, they're there now actually, even though we haven't quite finished setting it up. They're also on our legacy site as well. So if you just Google Moore College Library, you can get access to those.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, let me just click down. And I don't know if you've had any thoughts while I'm going through the question, or anything you'd like to comment on while I get to the next.
No, I do like the William's picture of that puzzle, because it is different parts, isn't it? And it takes time a little bit to get them all in order. And I know that many people start with certain collections, and there's always this debate: should you start ingesting the collections that are most risk, or should you do the one that actually is the easiest ones to get in? Because in the end of the day, you want to show results, don't you? You want to show that, yeah, we have started the process, etc. So, but there is puzzles, and things will take time, and as Jay said, collaboration with others. If you get stuck on something, talk to other people and learn from others.
Yeah, no, for sure. And on that point about implementation, Kimberly, there's one here for you about how long do you expect your implementation to take?
We're sort of working towards a 2-year plan, and so we're taking a format by format approach to ingest. So we're starting with one of the more difficult ones, with oral history collections, just for fun. And so yeah, we're in the process of sort of doing all of that data remediation work that we need to. Now we're starting to look at crosswalking that data to probably Dublin Core, and then finding ways to do bulk migration effectively.
No, good point. William, did you talk about implementation time periods? What's in your sort of heads about?
Well, we hope initial implementation to be finished this year, which will be a complete transfer of our legacy system. Then it'll just be ongoing additions to the system. So we hope to launch in the next month or so.
Is that launching the public portal?
Public
to make
portal,
that
yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. I'll look out for that because I like showing those on demonstrations. So you must whiz me an email once
Certainly
that's
will.
available. I'll be keen to get on there and look for some of those Harbour Bridge photos. And Jay, do you talk to people about implementation timelines? Do organisations put themselves under pressure, do you find, in this respect, or are they sort of more sensible and give a sort of longer term view? What are the thoughts from the sort of DPC on that?
Oh, look, I think I couldn't answer definitively because there's so many different contexts and there's so many different ways of running implementation projects. You know, I've heard everything from 6 months to 2 years and beyond. And depending what you bundle as part of that implementation, I mean, there is no definitive answer, as with so much digital preservation work.
Yes, true. Ever ongoing, isn't it? Yeah, ever ongoing. Right, I've got a couple of other questions here. Okay, what was your marketing and buying in strategy for the executive support to get Preservicus? I suppose that's open to all of you. William, do you want to go first on that one? Sorry to choose you.
Well, we did research into what systems were available, and we just presented a case to the college, and I think the college recognised the need for preservation, and we were able to convince them that the system was cost effective, was a solution to the issue, and would be of long-term benefit to the college. We didn't really have much problem in convincing them on that. So being a small institution, I mean, we know them all personally, so we were able to, personally convince them that this was a project they should embrace, and they did.
That's good. Sometimes it's not quite as easy to convince the powers that be. I suppose Anne and I, from our sort of years in the business, sometimes what we find are that the higher level folks who may not be in the business for very long are going to be there for 5 years or so. They don't see the importance of digital preservation because they're not going to be there when it becomes an issue. They move on. Executives tend to move on sort of quite quickly in an organisation, and so it's trying to convince them, isn't it, of the importance of it. So it's great if you've got others that do realise the importance. Kimberly, have you got any advice on that respect? How you did your procurement?
Well, we've been pretty lucky that we've got the Libraries Board that supports a lot of our digital preservation projects over the past 10 years. And they were able to provide some funds for us to purchase the system. Its digital preservation activity training has been fairly well embedded into what we've been doing for the better part of a decade now. So the organisational support was already existing. It was more about being able to go out into the market, feel like we had the right knowledge to be able to pull the trigger and get the system. So, you know, it seems like a long journey, but it's probably come at the best time that we've all got the right resourcing people on board to be able to implement such a thing.
Yeah, sometimes these procurements can take forever, can't they? But it's well worth going through due diligence and making sure you've bought the right solution. And Jay, any advice? Are there any documents that could be shared amongst members who've joined us today? Is there anything? Because quite often it's quite nice if people quite often say, oh, do you have any guidance on the type of questions and things like that in a procurement exercise? From your perspective, any advice?
Yeah, I know. You know, what I would say is there's some really great DPC advice on this. There is actually an executive guide, a toolkit for, you know, it's got all kinds of generic and specific messages and motivators that are specifically designed to communicate with executive level folks or people who hold the budgets or decisions and policymakers. There's an actual toolkit on the DPC website called the Executive Guide. And with my, with my Uni of Melbourne hat on, I can honestly say I used that guide to provide some really specific messaging that helped progress our digital preservation goals. So, you know, I can easily provide a link to that, or just have a look at the DPC website for the Executive Guide.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's good advice, and the fact that you used it in practice yourself as well speaks volumes. Okay, David, how are we doing for time? Can I just check in with you? Just
yeah, I think we're doing okay. Maybe check if there's one more question or not, Tracy, and then
I have got another question. I haven't. I'm sort of I'm reading it live here. So this is from Bridie. Joining a community of practice can be a great help with getting ideas for advocacy if needed from their experience. If you can illustrate the risk of not having DP frameworks, that is often a good approach. Yeah, so basically she's sort of saying here, yeah, this is good, yeah, and illustrate the risk of not having digital preservation is a big thing. Again, I don't know if any of our speakers would second that.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
We can provide you with all sorts of reasons why digital preservation is important. And that's the end of the questions from my perspective, unless Anne, you've had any other thoughts while we've been sort of chatting away here.
No, thank you, Tracy. I think that's absolutely fine. I got a couple of slides here. I just wanted to share some of the resources that we have on our website that you might also find useful. There you will find a large number of digital preservation case studies, for instance, if you want to read about other projects. There are blogs, there are videos, there are white papers, etc. that we have built up over the years. Also to note that the next online event that we are participating in is We Miss iPress, which is the big digital preservation conference that is not taking place in physically this year, obviously, but it's been done online instead in a couple of weeks' time. Also to point out that the recording of this session and the slides in PDF format will be available to you. And then if you want to contact any of us, you can do so by reaching out to our speakers directly, if you want, or by contact us here in Preservica, and you'll see a few ways of doing that on the screen. I really hope you found this session useful. I certainly did, and very interesting to hear from all our speakers. So thank you again so much to Kimberly, William and Jay for taking the time out to share these messages with the audience. So it just leaves me to say, please stay safe and goodbye from all of us. From Australia, Australasia, and from the UK.
Goodbye, take care everyone.
Goodbye, take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.